Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic. Would you support a mandatory environmental service for adults 18 to 30? Kind of like military service, but instead of fighting you must spend a few months on reforestation projects or ocean cleanup. Why or why not? Not mandatory, but there was a voluntary program like this in the US in the Depression. It was called the Civilian Conservation Corps. Participants got room and board, clothing, job training, and $30 a month, of which $25 had to be sent home. Most were single young men, so it went to their parents and younger siblings, in exchange for working on various projects on public land throughout the country. The reasons for it were both to provide jobs and because the Dust Bowl had opened people's eyes to the fact that the US was not a bottomless well of natural resources. Erosion was a big cause of the Dust Bowl, and the Dust Bowl was a factor in the Depression, so it all tied together. They were also called Roosevelt's Tree Army, because one of the big things they did was plant trees for erosion control. In my state, they built most of the state parks, a lot of them in areas that had been deforested for charcoal manufacturing and were marginal for agriculture. You can still rent out cabins that they built, and they're great, really attractive, and shockingly inexpensive. I'm actually going to stay in one next week. Some of them have photos from the CCC days on the walls, and it's really neat to look at them and know that you're still enjoying what they worked on. I definitely support a program like that today, but I think making it voluntary is, putting ethical considerations to one side, more practical. For one thing, you would have to pay participants, just like people drafted for military service get paid, and it would be very expensive if everyone did it. Plus, having it be voluntary means the number of participants can be matched the amount of meaningful work to be done, and the workers are more motivated. With the CCC, people considered themselves lucky to be picked. $30 a month was an attractive wage, and 3 square meals every single day was a significant perk, so discipline was straightforward. Do what you're supposed to do or get kicked out, and most people didn't want to get kicked out. It would probably take stronger incentives to get the same level of buy-in today, but healthcare and student loan forgiveness would be a good start. That is super interesting. Thank you for this answer. I didn't know this. I think you're right about making it voluntary and incentivized. Perhaps an incentive such as making higher education free for participants would be enough to get people interested. It would help take care of student debt, too. Glad you were interested. I've been low-key fascinated with this program since the first time I stayed in a CCC-built cabin. One of the parks I've stayed in has a little museum, with some artifacts and photos from the time, and notebooks full of CCC alumni reminiscing about their experiences. They had reunions, back in the 80s and 90s, I think, and they collected a lot of oral history at those. It seems like most of them remember it as a really positive experience, if challenging at times. The first group at a given location had to start by building their camp barracks, mess hall, all that, so some of them describe being plopped down in the middle of a muddy field in bad weather with an UN-assembled army surplus tent and wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. But apparently the food was great. Reminiscing 50 years later, they'd list all the things they got to eat, and there was a lot of camaraderie. There are still programs like this around. AmeriCorps is the offspring of the CCC. Within AmeriCorps is the Conservation Corps. Members of the Conservation Corps do tons of habitat restoration, trail building, prescribed burns, etc. I was even on a crew that did wildlife research, but that isn't as common. While the benefits aren't as big, some crews offer housing, you automatically get approved for food stamps, get a monthly stipend, and at the end of your term you get an education award that can be used towards college or student loans you already have. I think they offer insurance as well, but I never needed it. When you go on overnight work trips called spikes, you get a daily food allowance, and they pay for you to stay somewhere, which is usually a campground. You forgot to mention the pledge. I will get things done for America to make our people safer, smarter, and healthier. I will bring Americans together to strengthen our communities. Faced with apathy, I will take action. Faced with conflict, I will seek common ground. Faced with adversity, I will persevere. I will carry this commitment with me this year and beyond. Fist pump. I am an AmeriCorps member, and I will get things done. As silly as the pledge is, I still think about it and try to help my community out in all sorts of ways. I don't support involuntary anything. Outside of vaccinations, education, and taxes, I agree with this. Kind of an interesting line to draw. Why is it okay to mandate vaccines to prevent disease, but not service to prevent the steady destruction of the environment? That sounds like slavery with extra steps. Out of curiosity, do you feel that way about countries with mandatory military service, Norway, Korea, etc.? Yes. Not the guy you're responding to, but yes. I definitely do. But holy shit, I had no idea that that was the case in Norway. Good lord, they're portrayed as some Scandinavian utopia and they force you to do military service. Really? I feel like instead of forcing people to do so, they should be encouraged to. For example, if this was being forced by the state, instead of it forcing you to go, it would pay people to plant trees / clean beaches, etc. This is the way to go. This is how you create jobs. The world's biggest economic demand should absolutely be its own well-being. If we don't have a planet, your money is worthless. If we don't have a planet, your money is worthless. Rich people will do very well in controlled environments with easy access to increasingly expensive food and water, and they are the ones who are causing the damage. The fact that most people will suffer and have worthless amounts of money doesn't affect them. Personally, I believe that problems that start from the top need to be addressed at the top. Good point. You are not the first to suggest incentivizing rather than making it mandatory, and I believe that is the best way to go about it. Perhaps if it were rewarded with free university tuition, that would be better. I think free admission to university is a tad way extreme. Maybe a portion would work, for volunteer work, but I like where you're going with rewarding people with something else that betters them. Mandatory servitude is never a step in the right direction. How do you enforce this mandatory servitude? Guns. That's a little steep for ducking tree planting day. How do you enforce this mandatory servitude? Guns. How do you enforce literally any law? There's always the implicit threat of violence for enforcement of literally any law. All laws are ultimately enforced at the end of a gun. Think I'm wrong? Do a thought experiment. Ignore any law and enforcement. What is the end action? I wouldn't make it mandatory but maybe optional and have it cover some school for the adults once they are done. I like that a lot. I think a lot of people are taking issue with the mandatory part, which is fair. I figured that would be controversial. Incentivizing it definitely seems like a step in the right direction. Thank you for your smart answer. No. Some of us need to earn a living. Who's going to pay our rent etc. while we're doing this? Will we lose our houses / apartments if we're not earning money for months on end and can't pay rent? Also, however worthy the cause, forced labor is still slavery, and therefore completely immoral. Better to convince people to care enough to volunteer to help out in their free time, or pass legislation forcing companies to stop using plastic, etc. By forcing people to do this against their will, you will turn them off the cause and make them less likely to care for the planet, recycle, etc. in the long run. There's no way it would be unpaid. Many countries have forced military conscription for a specific number of years, South Korea, Singapore, etc. and are all paid by the government. I wouldn't be averse to something like this. But assuming that it would be unpaid is ridiculous. Singapore's conscript pay is around $400 per month. Good luck paying for rent / food if you don't live with your parents. You're basically enslaved for 2 years. The Estonian military pays its conscripts €100 a month. That doesn't pay for anything except basic toiletries and some snacks at the cafeteria. I don't support forced service of any kind. The purpose of the state is to protect its citizens from foreign powers and provide infrastructure and services that private corporations can't provide. As citizens have a collective interest in these things, it makes sense that said citizens should pay their fair share and that these taxes would then fund a professional military which compensates citizens enough to maintain a fighting force without a draft or any forced service. The same goes for environmental services in my opinion. I'm okay with paying a tax if that money is put to work effectively. We already have AmeriCorps, where you serve for very little compensation other than a stipend and some money for college. Someone suggested that awareness should be raised about this sort of program, and I think they were right. Thank you for contributing to the discussion. No, this is bullshit. We need to enslave people for litter duty. Don't back down now. So the old people who ruined the environment can force the young people to clean it up. Idiotic idea. Edit. Maybe remember ops topic before commenting post is about a mandatory program to fix things, not an argument if things need fixing or not. Guess it could also be said that a mandatory service program is drafting the public into cleaning up after corporations that made a fortune exploiting the earth, once again letting the responsible party sit back and do nothing to fix what they broke. Hate to break it to you, but the old people aren't cleaning it up. It's the younger generations or no one. You're talking about volunteers, but topic is about a mandatory program. If someone is going to be forced to fix things, it should be the ones who had a more direct hand in breaking said things. Conscript all the old people crabbing and bitching at city council meetings each week. They want someone to do something, load up a bus, pick a location, get to it.